I think a lot of my desire to write came from being a reader. I was the fat kid that the other kids like to pick with, and that's when I started to become very antisocial. And I lived in books. I always read above my grade level. One of my first chapter books was The Outsiders. I read that in, Lord, third grade, I want to say.
Wow.
And then I started reading Romeo and Juliet from there. And then just any book that was in the school library, I just devoured. I was the only kid in my grade school that was allowed to take books home because I would focus more on books than my schoolwork.
Where did this journey for Bryan Tann all start?
I'm born and raised in the city of champions, the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Right.
Actually, I still live here in Pittsburgh. I've only not lived in Pittsburgh 10 years out of my life. There was that 10-year period I lived in New England for a little bit, and that's the best part that came out of that was my kid. living among a bunch of Patriot fans, just that does no bueno.
I was gonna say that's enemy territory, isn't it?
It is. Like the only thing that would have been worse would have been moving to Baltimore or Cleveland.
Yeah, sure.
Pittsburgh's great. Pittsburgh, it was really cool growing up here because there's so much history. Like even with storytelling, August Wilson, from amazing playwright, and he became a hero of mine during high school when I found out who he was, the August Wilson Center on the Hill District,
Nice.
and that's history in and of itself because the Hill District back in the day, during, segregation before the Civil Rights Act, the Hill District in Pittsburgh was known as Black Downtown. It was, because Black people couldn't work in downtown Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
The Hill District overlooks downtown Pittsburgh. So it was Black Downtown,
So were your parents artists? What did your parents do for a living?
No. My parents are both retired postal workers.
Oh, wow.
My father's a Vietnam vet. He was a mail carrier. My mother was from Talladega, Alabama originally. And she moved up to Pittsburgh when she was about 9 and worked at Sears and Roebuck for the youngins out there. Sears and Roebuck was Walmart before Walmart was Walmart. And she worked there for a spell. And then she got a job at the post office and never looked back. She worked there for, Lord, close to 40 years. So where the imagination to be a writer came from, it definitely didn't come from either one of them.
So then who was your most influential person in your life that helped you realize your writer's journey?
It was people that I'd never met before. Robert McCammon, the author of a Swan Song, George Romero, Stephen King. The actors and actresses that I would watch them on television and just dream. So, long-winded answer is just, the heroes that I had growing up and people in books, that they were the ones that I went to, because, my parents divorced when I was a year old. My mother worked a lot. My mother was a great, strong, single mother. A lot of the times when you see movies about, Black single mothers, it's almost like they're telling my mother's story. But she didn't have the time. She worked so hard. And by the time she got home from work, she was dead tired. So she didn't really have a lot of time to be that encouraging, rah, 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 soccer mom. She just didn't have time. So it was, the books and the movies.
When did you get started writing, though? When did you write your first story, you think?
The reason why I'm laughing is because I was just thinking about this the other day. The first story I ever wrote, I was in 4th grade, and I should have been paying attention in math class, but of course I wasn't. I was writing, and I get on my son for doing the same thing. I do. It's hilarious, but and it was called "The Revenge of Frankenstein" as he gets back at the Wolfman. And it was the most random crap ever, but it made sense to me. That was the very first story I ever wrote. And it started with Frankenstein fighting his way out of the water because the Wolfman drowned him. Because when I was a kid, no one could beat up the Wolfman. No one could beat the Wolfman in my eyes. And at the end, Frankenstein got beat by the Wolfman again because Dr. Frankenstein tripped him. And when he fell, the Wolfman gave him Hulk Hogan's big leg drop. And that was the end of the story.
Nice. That's awesome.
And I actually wrote Hulk Hogan's big leg.
That's awesome. Nobody kicks out of the leg drop.
No one kicks out of the leg drop. Brother.
That's awesome.
After that, I started writing a lot of poems. I was a poet, all throughout the end of grade school, going into high school. I had notebooks just full of poetry. And I would write, little other things here and there, but they were never things that had legs. You know what I mean? I would start stories and then stop because I didn't know where I wanted to go. So I think that was the time when I was trying to run before I even knew how to crawl. Because, there's things that you learn in your English classes that prepare you to be able to write, how to outline, which it drives Josh Robertson nuts. I still love the fact that he said that my writing style gives him anxiety. I love that. I don't outline like a lot of other writers outline. I do outlining to a bare minimum. But back then, I didn't know what outlining was.
Sure.
So that's part of the reason why a lot of my stories didn't get a lot of legs.
Was English class one of those classes you did pay attention to when you were?
Oh, yeah. Oh, constantly. Constantly. I was such a little grammar Nazi as a kid. It wasn't even funny. Like, I used to get beat up because I would correct the other kids' grammar. Or I would just be walking with my nose in a book. What are you doing? The reading's not due until next week. Yeah, no. Already finished. But yeah, English class and science class were like the only classes that I really paid attention in. I didn't need anything else.
That's amazing. I wonder, with those early stories, do you look back and is there anything that you're still doing today that you did originally that you thought, you like you mentioned, your outlining and stuff evolves and you didn't know what it was when you first started, but is there something that you do grasp onto that you keep with you in the stories you write right now?
Oh, absolutely. Learning about a character. When I was a kid, I didn't understand that the only other people that heard voices were considered crazy. I hear, like, I don't know how other people do it, but I know, like, I hear my thoughts and they sound like someone's talking to me. And as a kid, that always frightened me. And then as I got older and I actually sat down to write my first novel, The Enforcer, I realized that those were characters trying to come to life. So, you know, there's times that, you know, if there's a new character, you know, kicking around in there, I talk to him. Sometimes I'll look in the mirror and just talk. I'll start having dialogue that I never even knew about. And I think that's kind of how I started doing, you know, different vocal impressions and stuff too. You know, I would, you know, watch tons of TV and try to mimic how people spoke. But then I realized that that was me giving voice to characters.
You took kind of a detour, or maybe added on to your portfolio in doing narrations for audiobooks as well. Yes. So how did that come about? And I'm wondering what that discipline and that medium has taught you and gave you, and has it made you a better writer?
It absolutely has, because I realize it's hard reading other people's stuff.
Yeah.
Once you become a writer yourself, it's hard to read other people's stuff. But at the same token, it helped me become a better writer. You know, because, well, I guess I'll start with the first part. How did it happen? It was an idea from an ex of mine. I will leave her at that. Not my ex-wife, but a person who shall forever remain nameless, who being with them was not the best of ideas, but gave me a good idea. Said, well, since you like to, you know, why don't you record audiobooks? That might be something you can do to make some money. You know, since your writing isn't making you any money, why don't you record audiobooks? How the hell does one do that? So I found out what I needed to do, you know, went to ACX and, you know, signed up for that, read some little whatevers, threw those out there. And TJ Weeks, his wife Chris, they picked up one of my audition recordings and asked me to record his book Unfleshed. And that was an experience. That was a very interesting experience.
Silence set in as David Scott opened his eyes to the darkness, and his heart felt as if it had doubled in size. It was pounding in his chest like an unborn chick raging against the eggshell from the inside. Each beat seemed to resonate, and he tried to slow his breathing down to not be heard, as his heart set a pounding drumbeat against his sternum, trying to focus his eyes to the darkness ahead. Confess your sin.
Because I realized that my love for acting and voices, I could do something with that as well. Because I mean, you know, let's face it, I'm no Michael B. Jordan. I'm no Denzel Washington. You know, I'm not gonna be, you know, the next leading man in an Oscar movie.
You never know.
Yeah, maybe. But I can get into a story and give everything I've got. So I sort of dug into my role-playing roots. So when I do record an audiobook, I give characters different dialects, different accents, different everything, you know, and I'm starting to record my own books as audiobooks.
Nice.
So, you know, I don't just read things straight out, you know, every character gets their own voice. So I feel like that really helped me to grow, because it's just more learning about characters. And this is stuff that I was doing anyway to learn about my own characters. So it's now just do that same thing for somebody else.
We do not have any of that information here. Who killed me? John asked, looking over his shoulder. His eyes narrowed to slits. John, Karen began. Who? He roared, turning to face her, causing her to jump back from him. Dr. Newton stepped forward, his kindly face hardened like granite. You will calm down, young man, or you will be tranquilized and wake up strapped in the isolation room again. Now, do you want that?
Did you ever think about doing anything else? Was writing always going to be what you were, or did you have designs on something else at some point in your life?
I was going to be a professional football player.
Oh.
I was going to be the second coming of Walter Payton and Lawrence Taylor. And
how's that? You gonna tackle yourself?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, as a kid at that time, I knew what a running back was, but I didn't understand what a linebacker was. So I just knew I was going to run with the ball and hit people while I was running with the ball.
Oh, I gotcha.
And then I discovered music. And then I was going to be a singer. I was going to be the second coming of Smokey Robinson and Boyz II Men and Luther Vandross. And that's just the way it was going to be. And then when I put my football dream away, I was going to be a singer. And I was going to do punk music. And I was going to do thrash metal. And I'm going to do this. The only, and I did not realize that until I got a little bit older, the only consistency in any of that was writing. I used to write my speeches. I remember I wrote a speech for when I would win Rookie of the Year. I wrote a speech for when I was a Super Bowl MVP. I wrote my retirement speech. I was going to retire from football at 34 years old. I had all of this planned out. I was going to have 4 kids, and I was going to marry, I'm trying to think, who was it? I want to say Angelina Jolie, but I didn't know who she was until 1995. No, I was going to marry Alyssa Milano.
Okay.
I was going to marry Alyssa Milano after college. When I got drafted, I was going to meet Alyssa Milano. We were going to get married, and we were going to have 4 kids, and I was going to retire at 34. I had it all planned. I actually wrote this all out. I don't even know where it's at anymore. I pray to God that it's nowhere in actual print form, because then someone will find it and laugh their asses off at me. Like, yeah, good luck, kid. But I would write these speeches, and I would make myself in video games and have little interviews. I'm serious. Oh, I was also going to be a professional wrestler too.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's what you do. That's where you go after you're done playing football, right?
So I was writing my promos.
Yeah, there you go.
I started doing e-fetting, which is online wrestling, online fantasy wrestling. Yeah. And I would write out my promos, and they were all these huge, larger than life things. The old Allegheny County prison on the waterfront, right at the Monongahela River. I bought the whole building, and I worked out there. And before big matches, I slept in the cells because I was a badass. The only real anything that connected all of that together was writing.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't realize I was a writer until I left Pittsburgh. I went to New England.
What was your wrestler name? What was your character's name?
Badass Bryan Tann.
Oh, okay. You used your real name.
Yeah. Well, no, before his name was Rodman.
Okay.
Because I was a huge Dennis Rodman fan in high school because he was different. Because at that time I realized that I wasn't like other black males. Yeah. I listened to Pearl Jam. I listened to Stone Temple Pilots. I worshiped at the feet of Kurt Cobain. The Crow was like it's still to this day one of my favorite movies, but it was my favorite movie at the time. Because of the grunge, atmosphere, that rainy, dank grunge atmosphere. And I loved it. I loved all of that. So Dennis Rodman to me was anti everything that I was told being a black male was at the time. So part of the reason why I'm bald now is because I started bleaching my hair. So yeah. First, my wrestling name was Rodman, and then in one of the written matches, my character was thrown through a barbed wire cage, and he flipped out and decided that the reason why he lost was because he wasn't being true to himself. And badass Bryan Tann was born.
Was it during that time when you were fooling around that you kind of realized, hey, I could publish something and do something, or was it well after that?
It was well after, because I started going through, and I told you, when you asked me to do this, and I even said it before we decided to start going live. I don't pull any punches. I talk about anything and everything in my life. I believe in almost complete, transparency of everything. I feel that if anyone has read anything or wants to read something, you've already looked at my soul, so I shouldn't keep secrets. I'm a survivor of sexual assault. I went through that twice in my life. Once when I was 4, once when I was 12. And I had a really hard time dealing with that, especially when I was 12, because I'm already, going through puberty is hard enough. And when the other boys in your class are growing taller and you're growing wider, and then you throw that into the mix, and now you're screwed up. And then my grandfather passed away in 1996, and that just sort of brought everything to a head. At the time, I just started taking all feeling and just packed everything down deep into a little ball and just held it there. And when I was 17, and this was a little bit before I was supposed to graduate from high school, I finally snapped. I had nothing left emotionally. And I was a little older than 7. I can't remember. I was a little older than 17. I was probably 18, 19 at this point. But I had gone to the hospital because of, just breaking down twice before. And this third time, when I broke down, I sort of disassociated being Bryan. I became someone else. And the name that I used was Bryce. And this figure, Bryce, became a reoccurring nightmare. I used to have this dream, and I actually wrote the dream like frame by frame in one of my books. But I had this dream that I had it felt like nightly, where I was fighting for my life. And toward the end of the dream, I was fighting a cloaked figure that I never saw his face. And we would fight, and we were like perfectly matched. And I would slip, and the figure would catch me. And just before the figure would kill me, I would see my own face.
Wow.
So I lived with that for so long. And then I started playing Vampire the Masquerade, and I turned the name Bryce, I gave the name a backstory, and I made this name, this figure, into a character so I could understand him. So, because once you understand something, you're no longer in fear of something.
Right, sure.
So I made this character into a Vampire the Masquerade character, and I played them all throughout LARPs, tabletops, online, everything. And I kept having the nightmares, but they were manageable. Well, fast forward, I moved to New Hampshire with my ex-wife. Now I've got no friends. I've got no family. I'm 100% isolated from everything I've ever known. I take her laptop, and it just started with a couple of words.
Wow.
A couple of words turned into a page. A page turned into several pages. After 3 or 4 days, I had like 75 pages of journal notes written as this character, Bryce Kreed.
Wow.
And next thing I knew, I take all 75 pages and I just devour them. And that's how I first started writing The Enforcer.
When you're searching for these characters, are you is it easy to find, or have you had trouble trying to find them before?
It depends, because they come to me when I'm asleep.
Oh, okay.
And the day is over, my brain finally shuts down. So sometimes they come to me that way. Sometimes I'll just get an idea for a story and they show up. Invincible Heart, it's a spinoff of Kendra Souter's Permutation Archives series. I started writing Invincible Heart a good 4 or 5 years before I even met Kendra.
Wow.
And before I even knew her story, but it just clicked. And the protagonist, John Baker, just kind of showed up. It's almost like this was meant for me, and everything just came together. So, I mean, it really depends on circumstance. Sometimes they come to me in my sleep, sometimes something that I've written that I didn't know what it was. And these characters just sort of come in like Legos. And the great thing about Kendra is that she and I we're like siblings in a lot of ways. It just fits. Like, I've come to her with something. I don't think she's ever told me no, because I think before I come to her with something. But I don't come to her with something that it's the end all be all, because it's her world. And I recognize that, like John Baker is my baby, but my baby is in her world.
Mm-hmm.
And with the third John Baker, there is going to be a third John Baker book.
Yeah.
I will have a bit more leeway, but at the same token, it's still her world. So I'll just have a little bit more, shall we say, carte blanche.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to narrating someone else's vision, it's kind of hard, because just from me as a narrator, if I don't know you, I have to try to get to know you as a person. I have to know who you are. I have to talk to you for a few minutes, and then I have to tell you what I'm bringing to the table. And then you need to tell me what you expect me to bring to the table. And we go from there. Now, I did have one author that, and I don't remember the guy's name, thank God, but working with him was an absolute nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
And because he thought, and what I'm going to say is very, very mean, and I don't mean to be mean, but it's just the truth from my perspective. The book wasn't all that. Like, this guy thought that he had the next great American novel. And to me, it's like, dude, this is at the dump bin somewhere, which, I mean, hey, far be it from me to trash talk anyone, because I have to beg. I would have to go to bookstores on consignment. So I'm no one to really talk, but I know what I like and I know what I dislike. I know what a well-edited book is, and I know what it isn't. This wasn't, I don't know who edited that book, but homeboy should get his money back. And I don't know where he got the idea for that story, my homie should have thought it out a little bit better. It wasn't all that. And he got very, very demanding, very, very rude, very, very actually threatened me a few times.
Whoa.
And finally I was just like, you know what? You in your book can kiss my ass.
Yeah, right.
And I stopped narrating for a long time. I wouldn't narrate. Like, offers would come in and I would just deny them. You know, I mean, I'm still sort of dealing with that because I do have a project that I'm working on for another author, and she's been very, very patient, and I need to get that done before I start working on, because I'm going to be narrating my own books.
Mm-hmm.
So with anything, my long-winded explanation, it helped me to learn how to be a team player, but it also taught me to have expectations and stick to said expectations instead of letting things get out of hand because I'm trying to be the nice guy.
I understand. That makes sense. It gave you a sense of professionalism a little bit, or a little bit.
It really did. It really did. How you talk to people, how you don't talk to people, and to be humble, because it's like, you know, I ain't the best. If I was the best of the best, I'd have a house in Fox Chapel.
Yeah.
You know, the rich. You know, one of the rich areas here in Pennsylvania.
You'd be in the NFL Hall of Fame and the WWE Hall of Fame right now.
Exactly, with Alyssa Milano at my side. So, you know, I'm not the greatest of the great. I'm just a schmo trying to get his place in the world. I'm just another jagoff.
All right, so let's talk about Bryce a little bit.
All right, let's talk Bryce Kreed.
So, how has Bryce shaped everything you've written from the moment that you started creating him and his story? And talk about how much you hold on to that character.
Bryce is forever he's my baby, man. When I write Bryce, it's like I'm writing me. You know, here's like everything that I always wanted to be: tall, strong, self-confident. You know, he's that guy. You know, he's grown a lot from, you know, just, you know, a nightmare. You know, he's my flagship. He's my flagship character. You know, I will probably always write about him. You know, I'll always have a story for him because he's just an amazing character, you know, and he's one part asshole, one part nice guy with a whole lot more asshole wrapped around. You know, if ogres have layers, Bryce Kreed have layers, and about 3/4 of those layers are an asshole. But he's the asshole that you love to cheer for because he's got a code. He's got, you know, and I mean, his sense of honor matches my own, and it's not even like I did that on purpose. I wasn't trying to put myself into a book. It just happened.
Did you ever have any trepidations about, because you did say, you know, that this was a character that was created through your nightmares and who you are, and when you started writing it, did you stop a little bit and look at it and go, uh-oh, I'm getting too deep into my own thing, and kind of have a little bit of intrepidation? Or did you say, fuck it, I'm just going to go for it?
At first I was nervous, but then I realized it was just right. And if I didn't do it, what would that do to me mentally? I had to take control. There was a point in time where, you know, Bryce came out on his own. It's like, well, that's not good. You know, I got pumped full of so much lithium and Depakote that my tongue almost swelled out of my head and I almost choked on it. So putting him in a medium that he could have control was me taking control. So I had to go there for my own sanity. I had to go there.
Interesting. So what has he done for all the characters you've created beyond him?
I think that he's made it so that I do my best to give my characters flaws. You know, a personality defect to overcome, something internally to overcome, something within them to sort of strive for, to strive to be better. Even some of my villains, you know, some of my villains sort of take the worst of Bryce and are just like, yeah, embrace the evil. And, you know, my protagonists are like, you know what? I'm not perfect, but God damn it, I'm the best me that I can be. And that's got to be enough. And some other ones are just like, I try to make sure that the, you know, characters aren't too much alike, but a lot of Bryce touches them because he's the gatekeeper. So there's always going to be that tiny bit of him somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Is flaws the characteristic that you value most in your protagonist and antagonist, or is there something beyond that that you always stick to?
I just want them to live and be authentic. I want my protagonist to be someone that you can picture. You know, Bruce Wayne is someone you can picture. You can picture a billionaire playboy, and then it's just like, oh shit, he's Batman. You know, or you can picture a Clark Kent. You can picture a Miles Morales. You can picture a Peter Parker. You can picture a Scott Summers. You can picture a Diana Prince. I want these characters to be someone that you can picture, that you can believe, because if they have to be real to you in some way, because that's how you're going to care about them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, cartoon characters, yeah, you love Bugs Bunny because he's a cartoon character, but let's be real, he's also kind of a dime a dozen of cartoon characters.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, look at George Bailey. Look at how important he is as a character. Look at Atticus Finch, how important he is as a character. You know, you care about these people. They mean something to you. And I think that any good character, God, I love this character. Oh, I hate that guy. Oh, I can relate to this guy. You know, that's got to be there. I don't want to make fluff cartoon caricatures. I want people, when they read my stuff, to think that these are real people that they interact with. You know, like I watch Blue Bloods and I'm all about Danny Reagan. You know, like I can relate to Danny Reagan. I relate to this guy. He's not just, hey, look at that generic beat cop number 2. Yay. You know, can't relate to that.
So what has your audience taught you that you maybe were naive about or just plain wrong that you now apply to every story you write?
I think what they've taught me is that I want to entertain them. I want them to be, are you not entertained? I want them entertained. I want to touch every single one of their emotions. Oh, this part made me cry. Oh, this made me so mad when that happened. Oh, I cheered when that happened. I want to hit every single emotional nerve. That's why my own personal tagline is, let me into your imagination. You won't be disappointed, because I want you, when you are done reading a Bryan Tann book, I want you to have felt everything. I want you to laugh. I want you to cry. I want you to be angry. I want you to be happy. I want you to be so anxious about what's going to happen on that next page that you don't want to put the book down. I want you to be so mad that your bedtime has come.
That's awesome.
That you're ready to call out of work the next day because you want to finish, because J.K. Rowling did that to me. S.E. Hinton did that to me. Robert McCammon did that to me. Clive Barker did that to me. You know, and because that was done to me, I want to do to everyone that reads my stuff.
When you're creating that atmosphere and you're trying to figure that out, you write series for the most part. So I'm kind of curious how your approach is to the first book to the third book and how you view that. Is that something you really think about, or do you just kind of let the story happen naturally and then you edit to cut it to a certain spot? Or are you thinking about how I'm going to move this first book into the second book and how I can get that audience hooked in there?
I just write and I let it come natural. If you try too hard to build it, it's artificial. Just let it be, you know. Do like the elves, man. Sing to nature and let the tree take its form, you know, for what you need it to be. That's what I do. You know, that's a little bit of Christopher Paolini with the elves. Like, all right, there's 2 books in the Bryce Kreed series, in the Path of Redemption series, right?
Right.
That was supposed to be 4. All right, book 2's ending wasn't supposed to happen until book 3 or 4. It just happened to happen there. I had no clue that was happening, and I was so pissed because I'm like, why? I had this mapped out. Bryce and Company. It was supposed to be 3. Sorry. Oh, like my fiance, she read both Bryce Kreed books in 3 days combined.
Nice.
Because I didn't try to change it. I let the story flow, and it worked. So that's what I do. It's if you try, like I said, if you try too hard, you're not going to have a good product.
What is your approach to the world building process? What do you tend to tackle first, and having to work within somebody else's world? Does that change how you approach a process as well?
Oh, absolutely. World building in Kendra's world, she did such an amazing job establishing that world anyway. All I did was write another part of it. One thing that I have the hugest pet peeve for are plot holes. I hate them. I can't stand them. And I made sure that there weren't any in either one of my books. You know, with the Permutation archives, Kendra's, you know, she's painted America as this bleak dystopian world where a madman has built a wall around all 4 borders of the United States. People are miserable. People are afraid because every year, you know, their kids got to get this blood test, and if they have a special power gene in them, goodbye. You never see your kid again. That is fear. That's desperation. And she built that so well. So what did I do? I went to the other side, the military side of it. And it's just a job. It's the job. But this is what we need to do. This is why we're doing this. You civilians don't know the why. We know the why. And now we're operating with that why. You know, and then in the Darklands, which is the overlying universe that the Bryce Kreed novels are in, I made that world that way because I want it to be my Star Wars. I want to be able to write multiple stories in this world. And in some way, they're kind of connected. Some ways they're not. In that world, it was kind of difficult because I so desperately did not want comparisons to the World of Darkness, the Vampire the Masquerade. And I so desperately tried to do something different than that. And then I realized, though, that, well, the Vampire the Masquerade, it had to use something for inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
So then I allowed myself to have the inspiration, but do it in my own way, so that people were like, oh, I can see that's where the inspiration came from, but it's his own thing. So building that world, I kind of went that way, where it's like, it's my world, but I know where the inspiration came from, but I worked really, really hard with it.
In your mind's eye, what are 1 or 2 of your favorite scenes that you've ever written?
Oh, man. Some of my favorite scenes that I've written, 1 or 2 of my absolute favorite scenes. One scene from Invincible Heart, when John Baker's in Chicago and he's trying to escape capture, and he's taken damage left, right, and center, and he falls from a building and lands in an alley, and alley rats start to eat him. I love that scene. Writing that scene was so much fun because it creeped me out. So writing that scene was awesome because it's like, yay, bad things. And it's a tie between, it's a three-way tie between the nightmare scene and The Hunted, which is the second Bryce Kreed book. The very first scene of The Enforcer, when we first meet Bryce Kreed, when he goes into the redneck bar, sort of my miniature nod to Eddie Murphy in 48 Hours.
Nice.
And the torture scene in my book, Ed and Livvy. I actually, fun fact, the scene in Ed and Livvy that I'm referencing, because my fiance's like, which one? Because there's a couple. The scene where the protagonist, Ed, gets revenge on his ex-wife. But here's the thing. I, at one point, had it fully written. Every single gory, evil, monstrous detail. I personally, took it out before I sent it to the editor because I thought it would be too graphic and I did not want to be called a misogynist. But that scene was my favorite because that was among my favorites because I could write it. It was bad too. It was so evil. It's so evil. I have to see if I can find it. I pray to God I can find it. Even if I can't, I know I can rewrite it, but I don't think I ever would.
I'm interested to know what scene people want to talk to you about mostly.
The one scene that I've been asked about a lot is actually the end of Ed and Livvy. My PA, Ebony McMillan, she loved it and was like, is that it? My fiance goes, is that it? Everyone who has read Ed and Livvy, all they say is that it? I'm like, yep. Because it's actually one of the reviews that Ed and Livvy got was, did I get an accidental art copy? It ended so abruptly. It's like, no. I did that on purpose. I purposefully ended the book that way. And I actually had a couple people tell me, well, now you've got to write a sequel. No, I don't. Let your brain do the work. I'm done. I think that's one book that will not have a sequel. I don't think it will.
When does a character take shape for you, though? Is there a certain point in which you go, okay, I'm in it now. I've got this guy going. Is there a point in the story that you think is a vital point for the character?
When I'm first getting to know them, and when I give them their own dialect, their own tone of voice, that's when I know who they are and where they're going to go. And I try to expand upon that. Bryce Kreed was completely different, obviously, but the people that back him up in the story, one of them is of Irish descent. I knew I wanted him to be of Irish descent. I had to give him a voice. Another character who, another little insider tip, he survived mainly because of my little brother begging me not to kill him off. So I had to give him more. But even with the female lead, I had to give her a little something. She had to be, well, what are you? Who are you? What do you have? And then she showed me, it's like, okay, that, so a lot of it just comes in the brainstorming. Sometimes even before we get to the book itself. And then sometimes they arrive organically and it's just like, this is who I am, this is what I want. I'm in the game now, coach. Okay, you're in the game now.
Nice. So it sounds like the background is very important to your characters for you.
It really is.
Is that the element that that shapes most of your characters?
Absolutely. They've got to have some sort of background. They've got to have a backstory. I'm sort of like Jake Peralta in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Everyone's got to have a backstory. They just have to, because I need to know who they are. Who are you? Where do you come from? What is your point? What do you do here? I'm like the Bobs from Office Space. What is it that you say you do? So backstory, if the character doesn't have a backstory for me, then it's like, tell your story, walk, and you'll get into the next one. I like in-depth, I like detail, but not too much detail.
Mm-hmm.
Don't give me 30 pages of what the leaves look like, please. That was one thing as a writer that I realized a long time ago. You can over describe things. I don't need to know how the dew came across the blade of grass.
I don't like fantasy because of that purpose, because there is so much exposition and there's so much explaining, and it's just like, can't you trust that I'm smart enough to know what you're talking about when you do this to go to there?
Paint. It's just like when you paint. Yeah. Don't paint the picture and tell me what to see. Paint the picture and let me see it for myself.
Yeah, I mean, and the things you get the most out of are the things that are like the emotional aspect, right, and the psychological aspects of characters.
Exactly. I think the only book that got into exposition and explaining that I still truly love, Robert McCammon does a great job at explaining, but explaining in a way that he's not telling you what it looks like. He's assaulting your senses so you can see what it looks like. And that's how I do it. I assault your senses. Because I remember I had someone telling me, quit telling me, show me.
Yeah.
So that's how I do it.
All right. So let's come to the fun part of this and talk about what motivates you to kill a character. How do you decide that? When do you decide that? And what has been your favorite way that you've killed a character? I knew this was going to be a fun one for you.
It is fun. I think on one hand, what is going to hurt the protagonist? How's it like? Is it going to help motivate them? Is it going to hurt them? Is it going to crush them? How much fun is it for the antagonist? And really, what works best for the story? I try to make sure it works best for the story, obviously, but really, what's going to dictate the story where I want it to go? Sort of like bowling or chess, And one of my favorite ways to do it with one character is really in how it affected one of the lead characters. How that character's death affected the lead character and forced that lead character to do what needs to be done.
What does every Bryan Tann story or book have to have?
I think everyone has a reference to Pittsburgh in it. Every Bryan Tann story has a reference to Pittsburgh in it somewhere. And somehow, some way, everyone somehow ends up in Pittsburgh. There's something about Pittsburgh, and even in Ed and Livvy, Ed is originally from Pittsburgh. In The Enforcer, Bryce comes from Seattle to Pittsburgh. In The Hunted, they're fleeing Pittsburgh. In Invincible Heart, they go through Pittsburgh to go to, well, it's not a suburb, but a small town, a small city outside of Pittsburgh called Monongahela. But the Monongahela River goes from Monongahela to downtown Pittsburgh. So every Bryan Tann's, even in my book, not book, but my blog short story series, Apocalypse, takes place in Pittsburgh. So there is Pittsburgh in every Bryan Tann story. I feel like my first responsibility is being true to myself.
Nice. Not
to anything or anyone else. Not to the quote unquote Christian faith, not to, I don't owe anyone. Only people that I owe anything to are the people that read my books. I owe them a great story with amazing characters, good plot, something to laugh about, something to cry about, That's what I owe. I don't owe anything else. You know, I'm not going to sit here and jump in your face. Hey, I'm black. I'm black, you know. Hey, I'm black, y'all. I'm black. Hey, I'm black. Well, what's the point of that?
Yeah.
Now, if I can help another author, I'm happy to do that, whether they're black, white, Asian, Hispanic, whatever. I don't feel that my race should have to have air of importance. I feel like my only responsibility I have is if another author who's on a different level than I am needs a little bit of help, nudge them in the right direction for the help that they need.